I've been trying to wake up America for 4 years. I'm making some progress, not enough. A lot of people have severely criticized me because I didn't have evidence about the gun and I didn't have evidence about the shellfish toxin. In fact, people told me that the CIA had never engaged in assassinations. If they had just been aware of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which investigated this very subject and this very assassination in 1976, they would know that that's not true. For it's in the archives of the film of those hearings that we find reference to the gun, photographs of the gun, film of the gun, reference to the shellfish toxin, but still no proof of the toxin. Until we watched a show on television, on public broadcast station, one night, here recently, called Secret Intelligence. And in that film, it showed a PhD doctor, Hannell is his name, explaining and showing where and how they manufactured shellfish toxin to be used in assassinations at Fort Detrick, Maryland, under the supervision and control of the Central Intelligence Agency. Now you're going to see those two clips. These two clips came to me originally from a research team of Colonel Keith Ranch. That's an honorary title, by the way, given by me for the outstanding work that he's done in helping us unravel this mystery and other mysteries. And Gordon Davis. Now, the copies they sent us weren't too good, so we kept searching. We found better copies than that, and that's what you're going to see. Now you're going to see the gun, and you're going to see proof that they used shellfish toxin, and that the CIA had both of these in their possession.
We have seen today the dark side of those activities, where many Americans who were not even suspected of crime were not only spied upon, but they were harassed, they were discredited, and at times endangered.
Frank Church headed a Senate committee probing the intelligence community. Church took an open approach that some of his colleagues questioned.
Where does the public's right to be secure override the public's right to know about something? Because in informing the public on a very sensitive matter, you're also informing the potential enemies of the United States. So I think you run into a philosophic conflict there. And I err on the side of protecting the security of the people.
For 30 years, Congress had turned a blind eye to intelligence. Now senators competed for the national spotlight as the intelligence hearings went public.
Every television camera in town was there, and it was really cranked up for a great show. I was told to bring this gun that we had developed and never used on people. My counsel, a very splendid guy who was with me, he said, look, don't you get near that thing. If it has to be handled, I will handle it.
Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for?
We have indeed.
For killing people? Don't point it at me.
Mr. Colby was supposed to bring this gun up to Mr. Church. But seated next to him was the ranking Republican, Barry Goldwater. And Barry reached out and grabbed the gun and held it like this and got the picture that day. Because it was in every picture in the United States and maybe around the world, every front page. And the next day I confronted Goldwater. I said, Barry, did you know you were going to get your picture in the paper by taking the gun? He said, yes, I did. And I said, you took the gun away from the chairman. He said, I know I did. I said, where'd you learn that trick from? He said, Hubert Humphrey. And it worked.
While senators clamored for photo opportunities, Colby devised a strategy to save his agency.
If you try to hide every possible imperfection, it'll blow up in your face and you'll be worse off. Whereas if you can control it and be responsive and give them an honest feeling of what the whole thing is about, then I think you can survive one of these things.
You've heard of the doctrine of plausible deniability.
Yes, and I've rejected it now, Senator. I say that we cannot depend upon that anymore.
So you don't find the work of this committee unwelcome?
No, I do not. As I've said to the chairman, I welcome the chance to try to describe to the American people what intelligence is really about today. It is an opportunity to show how we Americans have modernized the whole concept of intelligence.
Colby's decision to cooperate was unpopular with some former CIA leaders who tried to hold on to the agency's secrets.
You were specifically asked about shellfish toxins and shellfish poisons. You say it's inconceivable that a secret intelligence arm of the government has to comply with all the overt orders of the government. Is that an accurate quote or not an accurate quote?
Well, if it's accurate, it shouldn't have been said.
Well, now,
Looks like we're on plausible denial again, is all I can say here, Mr. Chairman.
Well, you're never entirely sure because, after all, many of the people in the CIA have been trained to lie. That's their job, to spread propaganda overseas. Not that all of our propaganda are lies. In fact, most of it is an effort to reinforce the truth of what America stands for. But some of the propaganda is lies. So you're dealing with people here who have been trained to mislead when they need to. But all you can do, and all we did, was to ask as many people, as many questions as we possibly could, and when we found contradictions, to pursue those contradictions by asking yet more people.
If one has in one's possession or under one's control bacteriological or chemical weapons, they can be used both defensively and offensively.
And by use offensively, we mean to include killing people, is that right?
Well, they have the capacity to kill people if they were used in that way.
unrestrained, illegal, secret intimidation and harassment of the essential ability of Americans to participate freely in American political life shall never happen again.
And suddenly it all began to roll out. The IRS was targeting thousands of Americans for tax investigations in order to chill activity on their part that they didn't like. The U.S. Army was conducting surveillance of civilians in civilian life. There was a whole pattern of this running throughout government. And it was, of course, once you saw what was going on, it was a shock. We saw the tip of an iceberg that could have destroyed American liberty.
Methods for assassinating Castro already existed. This is Fort Detrick, Maryland. This once secret facility was home to CIA experiments with drugs like LSD. It was also an armory for the agency's executive action capability, a program begun under the Eisenhower administration for disposing of unwanted foreign leaders. Some of the plots called for lethal poisons that were manufactured here. Dr. Everett Hennell, a microbiologist at Fort Detrick for 3 decades, worked in association with the CIA.
These are what we call Class 3 cabinet systems. They're gas-tight systems for working with almost complete safety with any infectious diseases, toxins, things such as the shellfish toxin. They're very toxic indeed, particularly when highly purified. And I understand that these could be placed on steel needles and fired with air guns into an animal and induce death almost immediately. So that they were apparently a very effective, or could be a very effective type of covert weapon.
But the real targets of these deadly drugs were not animals.
Well, now that you've seen the gun, and now that you know that the shellfish toxin did exist, and that this weapon was capable of firing it in pellets or on needles, and killing animals and people, things take a more sinister turn.